Hi, friends, SAP users, consultants, experts, and those who are new to SAP. You're welcome to another training session. This is for a series of training we have been looking at for quite a while. We've been looking at SAP S/4HANA Finance configuration. We have looked at a lot of concepts. We have looked at the concept of clients, we've looked at the concept of enterprise. We've looked at documentations. And today we're looking at a very, very important topic, which is part of the, well, a little bit tricky. They might say it's the job of the basis consultant, but a functional FICO consultant should actually know how to do what we call transporting customizing objects or customizing requests. Now, the question is, when you do your configurations and you raise requests, what happens if you are, of course, when we discuss the topic about the client concept, I explained that depending on the phase of the project you're in, if, for example, we are the preparatory phase, and we have started our configurations and we start configuring and we have various kind of requests. I'll show you what the request is. How do we move that request or that object that we have configured from, for example, from the sandbox or from the development client to the testing client? That is the essence of this training. The essence of this training is to learn how to transport all your customizations from one client to another or from one server to another. We'll explain those two very important concepts. Once more, it's your SAP ECC and S/4HANA Finance and CEO consultant, Kelechi, and welcome to another training session for today. So let's go into the training and see, let's try to understand what a customizing request is. Would actually see that also from our SAP system and take it from there and learn how to import and how to copy these requests. Thank you. Okay, so what is a transport request? A transport request is a kind of container or collection of changes that are made in the development system. Take note, or the development client. It also records the information regarding the type of change, the purpose of transport, the request category, and the target system. So basically, all your configurations or changes that that are being made in development clients is what we call your transport requests. Okay, so it records information regarding the type of change, like I said, the purpose of the transport, the request category, and the target system. It's also known as what we call the change request. So change request is it happens before go live. It happens after go live. There might be some configurations that the initial project team did not take into cognizance, and when or there might be some form of changes in the business or the business requirement of a client. When that happens, change requests will have to be raised. And like I said, depending on the project you're in, this is more of the responsibility. Transporting is more of the responsibility of business guys, while the configuration for this change, of course, would happen by the from the functional consultant. But we're going to just learn how we make this change request, how we can also transport them. Each transport request contains one or more change job, also known as your change task. Task are stored inside a transport request, just like multiple of files that are stored in some folders. Transport requests can be released only once, all the tasks only once, and all the tasks inside the transport request are completed, released, and deleted. Okay, so what it's trying to say is that your transport request is a collection of all your change requests in your configuration. So let's say, for example, you're trying to configure, like we did in our previous video, you're trying to configure, let's say, business area, and you actually do your segments, you configure like 3 different segments. Those 3 different configurations are inside a transport request. And if you configure more and don't change the transport request, they keep entering into one transport request. I'm going to show you, practically how this happens in SAP. All right. Now, change request tags is a list of objects that are modified by a particular user. Each task can be assigned to or released by only one user. So there is creation of the change request, there is creation of the tags, there is releasing of those tags. The release would facilitate the import. You have to release those requests or those change tasks before you can actually do your proper importing. However, multiple users can be assigned to each transport request. So, well, that happens, you can have, depending on, like I said, the configuration team, a user can be assigned to a change request that has to do with segments. Another user can be assigned to a change request that has to do with asset accounting. And that user, the AR module, just like that. So all the configurations that happen within your own transport request, you might be in charge of releasing them or copying them. So that's actually what this is about. So let's look at the naming convention for transport requests. Of course, you're going to see when we log into our SAP system or go into our SAP system, you're going to see that those requests are coded. Like if you remember when we create new configurations, there's always a request, and those requests come in a coded form. All right, so the SID, or what we have, the DEV, talks about the system you're in at the moment. Okay, so as you can see, we have, whenever a request is made, like I initially said, a request number is generated. And how do we read this request number? The first 3 digits, depending on the SAP system, you see it's in the dev. K is a fixed word, a keyword. And of course, the last 6 digits would possibly be a range from, of course, generated internally from the system. The basis team and the ABAP team actually understand more when it has to do with this, what will be the outcome of this naming convention. But ours is to look at it and understand, what the idea is about. Okay, so just a brief. The project manager or a lead is responsible to create a transport request and assign the project members to the transport request by creating different tags for each, of the project members. So just looking at the organization of how this requests are actually generated. So like I initially said, every member can be assigned to a transport request. So let's go into the SAP system and see exactly what the transport request looks like or what it's about. So you should have logged into the system. Now, of course, remember, we did some configurations in our previous session where we created the segments, the business areas, the functional areas. So how do we get to see those configurations and those requests? You can use the transaction code SEO1 or SEO9. So I'm using SEO9, just enter that, click on enter. This is what we call the transport organizer, right? And if you remember, once you do that, of course, the user is displayed. We have the different request type. Before I go into displaying the request, we need to understand what these various request types are. Okay, so the first is the workbench request. Of course, it contains repository objects and also is used by for cross-client customizing objects. That's customization across various clients. But Workbench is basically used by the ABAP team, and they handle also requests that is generated from the ABAP side. The next is customizing request. So basically, Workbench is done by the ABAP team. Customizing request is done by the functional team. Of course, ABAP are the technical, you can call them the technical consultants. Now, customizing request contains objects that belong to client-specific customizing. So what this means is that all the company codes within a client, so it's client-specific. It's not cross-client, it's client-specific. So, for example, we have the various type of clients. We have the development client, we have the QA client, we have the production client. So it's client-specific. And as per client settings, these requests are automatically recorded as per when users perform customizing settings, and the target system is automatically assigned as per the transport layer. So it happens, change request or transport request happens automatically, when customizations are done. But you have the option actually to define whether that will be automatic or it will be manual. We're going to see that as we proceed. Right. Okay. All right. So the next is transport of copies. To transport to a specific, is used to transport to a specified SAP system. The objects are transported with the versions they have in the current SAP system. So basically, you can transport from an SAP system to another. Generally, of course, when you do that transport, the original location of the system remains unchanged. So you can actually do your transport your customization objects to a specified SAP system. This is explaining transport of copies, right? The next is relocation. Relocation is used to develop objects in another SAP system on a temporary basis. Example, you might want to make a special development in a separate SAP system so as not to interfere with the development process. So it's just a suspended. It can be used as to make changes or developments probably in a special nature, so that development does not affect or interfere with the development process. So these options are here. Like I said, for functional consultant, we work with the customizing request. Technical consultant work with the workbench request. Sorry about that. And we have request status. We're going to leave it as modifiable, and we can actually go to display. Okay, we have said that customizing request contains objects that belong to client-specific customizing as per client settings. These requests are automatically recorded. This is optional. So if you want to know if it's automatic or manual, or you want it to be manual, you can define that setting in the transaction code we call SEC4. That has to do with your client administration. So this is my client, double click on it. So you can see changes and transport for client-specific objects. You can see the option here is automatic. So once we create a new object, it automatically generates that request code that we use to actually do our transport. So going forward, let's look at all the transport requests we have raised so far, all the change requests we have raised so far. So go to display, leave this as modifiable, go to display. Now, if you follow through with the previous training on when we created the organizational object, you're going to observe that all these were actually created, right? So you can see here that these are my change request codes for each of these configurations. So the idea is that if I want to transport, for example, this segment from this development system to a QA system, I'll have to do that using this request code, or what we call your change request code. This is actually your request number. So for every customization object, or every customizations that are actually carried out by the functional consultant, it generates a change request code. And like I said, you can have only one change request and have a lot and have sub customizations inside one change request, or you can split your change request individually as per configuration. So let me do an example so this looks very clear. All right, so I'm just going to create a new GUI. Then I'm going to go to SPRO. For example, I want to create a new customization. I want to do, so I'm going to go to enterprise structure, definition, financial accounting. For example, I want to do a financial management area. So I'm just going to execute that. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and call this KK01 of functional financial management for KK01. So I'm going to apply and save. So immediately I save that. So this is exactly what I've been trying to explain. Any customization you perform, it generates a request, what we call the customizing request, which is exactly what we have here. Right? So I'm just going to go back, exit here so it doesn't affect that. So I have a new request number. Now, this request number is for this description. It's already existing. If I don't change this, create a new request, it's going to save this FM area or the financial management area inside of this already existing request number. And if I'm transporting, I'm going to transport everything that is inside this request number. It could be like 10 configurations. So one request number can have lots of configurations. But if you want, for simplicity's sake and for clarity, you might want to specify each of your configurations such that they all have their individual request numbers. So to do that, I'll click on create. You see this ends with 155. So I click on create. This is my FM area. Click 01. Source client is 400. And click on save. You see it has changed from 155 to 157 for this. So I'll click on OK. So that being done, I'm going to go back and display. And now I have a new request, 157. All right, so I'm done with these configurations. I want to transport this request to another client, which is a QA within the same server, right? Within the same server, but another client. Okay, so how do I do that? Of course, the transaction code SE09 will give you access to copy the request. When you're done with copying the request, you go to another transaction code with SCC1 to actually do the transport. All right. So go use Control Y. Control Y and copy, Control C. So this, I want to transport this request. So when you're done, you can go back and use the code SCC1. However, our ABAP team is yet to set up this code. So I'm going to continue this training using our ECC system. The settings are actually the same, so no cause for alarm. Just to show you basically what the screen looks like. Okay, so whether it's if you're using S4HANA is fine, if you're using ECC is fine. There's no much change. Actually, for my S4HANA, I don't have access to SCC1. The business team is trying to rectify that. So I'm going to use my ECC to just explain this process. So either ways, whichever application you're using is fine. So I'm going to go to SCC1. Remember, I want to transport the request I've copied. So remember our source client then was 400. Your source client is 400. But this might not work because this is a different server altogether. And the next thing is to paste. You have to paste the code you copied from the customizing request. I'm going to assume this. Okay. Then you go to test. First you have the source client. You paste the transport you copied. So let me just do that. Okay, so that's SEO9. Remember, we copied this. So yeah, you have to paste this code here and confirm your source client, which is 400, and you use test run. You click on start immediately. Remember, what we're trying to do, of course, this does not exist. It's not cross client. So let's use 000, which is a client that this system knows. So once you do start immediately, remember, you're trying to move the customization request from the development client to the QA client. And the basis team by now would have set up these two clients on your server. Immediately you run this transaction code and you put the transport request, you're going to observe that the system is going to lift that configuration and all the objects in that configuration from your source client, which is the client you're working on, to the quality client, which is the client you wanted to transport to. So you can see now that the testing was successful. So replicate this step. If you're using S4HANA, just replicate this step in your S4HANA system. And once you've done the test and everything is successful, untick the run and do start immediately. So it will bring out the option, copy client specific data from. So this is my development client and this is my quality client. So if you say yes, it's going to try to move these configurations and program was run successfully, right? If I log into my client 800, which is my create client, I'm going to see the whole configuration for this request in my client. For this request, basically, of course, you can see the requests. They're all here. You can also do, remember, this is the ECC system. So whichever, this applies to both S4HANA and ECC. So whichever of these clients you're using, this process applies, right? So I can also go and paste that here and test run, start immediately, and the process for transporting is actually done. All right, so that is actually how to transport your client or transport your request or your customizations from one client to another within the same server. All right, so that is that. Now, the other one we have is imports, like the import process. Copy actually just copies the, it's just like when you're copying and paste, it leaves the data open in the other server. Import will mean to import the whole process. And it's actually another way of moving information from one client to another. But the difference is that in importing, you can import from one client to another with different servers in different servers. So that's the difference between import and copy. Copy is cross-client, but is within the same server. Copy is, yes, cross-client from clients 400 to client 800 within the same server. Import is cross-client, but in different servers. And of course, the first step to importing is that you have to actually release that request first before you actually transport. So that's the basic difference between copying and transporting, right? So it's the same process. If we go to our customizing objects here, and you see the option released, right? If we want to check, this is not active, you want to check for all modified requests we have done, that is copying, we can check that. If we want to check for release actually is a functionality that has to do when you want to import customizing objects or customizing change request from one client to another in different servers. So it's the same process. You go to display, identify the request, the change request you want to copy. Basically, once that is identified, you can highlight and you have this release directly icon on your screen. So click on release. Referencing this not yet released, I think let's see if we're going to release the customizable objects first. Okay, let's release this first. Okay, so you can see that tax this has been released to request this. Now go to the requests and you can see the icon that is ticked and click on release again. So first of all, you drill down and get the customizable objects and go up to the group and do the release. So you can see that local request this has been released, right? Now, once this happens, it has been released from this server. You need to log into the other server for which you want these change requests to transport to. And, you can do that with the T code. So let's just go to a new GUI. You can use the transaction code STMS_import. To view. So automatically, when you come here within in the other server, you have to also click import all requests, right? So that request is actually waiting for you to log into the import queue and import it into this server. But we can't be able to do that because, this is a standalone system. It's not server connected, right? So that's just to show you the step of how you can import from one client to another. So I'm going to go back. Also, to confirm, you can go back. If you go to release, just change this, click the drop down. You can say, select dates. Just to see the releases that have been done. The system is a little bit slow. So this is done, so you can just select this and display. So you can see that the system displays the customizable task that has, or the customizable request that has been, imported. You can see this is actually verified. Yeah, and also Sorry about this. This is something else. For more SAP client copy codes, you can reference this. These are the transaction code. If you want to, do remote client copy, client export, client administration, SEC4, we have seen that. Delete a client, SEC5, copy special selection, SEC1. These are also very important codes used by the basis team to carry out the operations when it comes to importing. So thank you very much. I believe you have learned the concept of transport, how to do a transport between within a server from different clients, and actually how to import a transport. Remember, the import process is between different servers. However, those servers, the basis team would have to ensure that these servers are relational, they speak to themselves. Like I said, this function is more of the responsibility of the basis team. However, it's important that functional consultant also understands this process. It could be that the project you find yourself in, you might be the one to actually transport your configurations from one client to another. And you'll most likely be using your SEC1, and you're most likely going to be copying instead of doing a full transport across servers. So thank you very much for watching, and please, wherever you find this video, share, like, follow us on YouTube, recommend the video. Why not, if you require probably more information about SAP training and resource materials, you can email me or send me a WhatsApp message on the number on your screen. Thank you very much. For this class, we have learned about transporting, customizing requests. We have looked at what the customizing requests, the transport requests are actually all about. Remember that we have also talked about the concepts, the definitions. We looked at some of the definitions of what the workbench request is and what the customizing request is. And also, we have looked at the transport organizer, if you remember, where you can display all your customizing request or your customizable task that you have carried out during customization or configuration. Thank you very much for your time, and do have a lovely day. Remember to stay safe, and remember to share and like, and make sure other people can actually benefit from this training. Thank you very much.